Hi, welcome to the Wavy Digital Desk. Today we're going to be talking about the Chesapeake Walmart mass shooting. It's been a week and we just wanted to recap what we know, what we've been reporting on, just so that everybody knows what happened and all the information that we have so far. So I wanted to first turn it over to Adrian, who's going to speak about the details coming from directly at the night of and what we know about in general of what happened.
So I was out at the Walmart with our field crews, which included Michelle Wolf, Cortez Grayson, Corby Slaughter, Brett Hall, out at the scene of Walmart. We got out there a little bit after 11. I remember we first started learning about the mass shooting just before 11 o'clock. I was actually laying in bed when I got a text from a former colleague letting us know that something was happening, and we got in touch with the public information officer. His name is Leo Kaczynski. He was very helpful to us that night, doing his job, letting us know as much as he could. I remember I texted the PIO right before 11, and he was able to get us information by 11:01. He was able to tell us that it was an active shooter at Walmart on Sam Circle, and that there were multiple fatalities and multiple injuries. Now, at this point, police didn't have a count. Police and fire were on the scene, and they believed there was only one shooter at the time. They believed the shooter was dead, but they had not finished clearing out the Walmart. We learned later that the call for the active shooter actually came in around 10:12 p.m. when Walmart was open to the public. People were shopping there. I believe police estimated about 50 people were in the Walmart at the time of the shooting. Officers arrived by 10:14, so that's an incredibly quick response, and they were in the building by 10:16. Leo told us that they were clearing out the building, being very meticulous row by row, and they were able to declare it safe around 11:20. So while we were on the scene, I remember driving in, coming around that curve, and I just saw this massive police response. And at that time, there was a media staging area. So for everyone who doesn't know, it was kind of a safe space where reporters and photographers could go to report on the scene but not interfere with the police investigation. So as I'm coming around that corner and I'm seeing what I would estimate to be probably 40 or 50 police cars and ambulances, I see Leo and another fire PIO. And by the time we got there, they were able to give us basically the same information, and they were able to go live with us on a press conference. I mean, they were really on the ball with what they could give us, and obviously we didn't want to speculate beyond that. I will say, though, it was, I think because it happened in such a public place, we were getting calls and emails and tips coming in, learning very quickly that it was an employee and that employees had been injured. We actually had a photographer who got there before any other media did, so he was a little bit closer to the scene. We knew that there was a victim outside. And that night we actually spoke with a shopper who was there, and she was just leaving as the shooting broke out, and kind of the mass response from the shoppers, the way that the gunshots just started going off. And we learned later that it happened in a break room and that the shooter was a Walmart employee. So all of that information kind of started coming out and was confirmed in the following hours and the next day. But John was actually on scene on Tuesday as well, but he was at the Reunification Center.
Yeah, so like Adrian, I kind of started seeing stuff on social media, saw stuff happening in some of the police scanner groups, and getting texts about, hey, are you seeing what's going on? Did a quick Twitter search and started seeing more and more people talking about it on Twitter, and that's when reached out to the station, was like, all right, where am I going? Where do you guys want me to go? Because like Adrian said, this happened around 10:15, and we didn't really start getting out there until a little after 11. So I drove directly to the Chesapeake Conference Center, which is where which was the staging location. It was the only physical staging location. You can see it on your screen right now. That's where the police were sending family members, friends, employee, anybody who thought that one of their loved ones was in the Walmart at the time of this tragedy. So we were standing outside there. It was myself and one other crew who was there. It was a very small presence there. There wasn't like, a mad dash of people, not a whole bunch of people there. People slowly trickled in as the night went on because, again, keep in mind, and this was something I said Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, was, this happened so late that a lot of people weren't learning about it until the next morning. So some people had to be waking up in the middle of the night to find out that, hey, there's an active shooter mass shooting at the Walmart, and so-and-so may have been there, and they're trying to figure out where to go, trying to figure out what to do. I think I was first on air at around midnight talking about where I was at the conference centers, what we were seeing, the amount of families coming in. There was a good police presence there. There was about 3 Chesapeake police cars that were there that night. There was also, seeing families slowly start to come in, start to walk inside, get information about, what was going on, trying to figure out what happened with their loved ones. And again, that really started to die down around, I want to say 2:33 in the morning. I was on scene at around a little after midnight, and then I left at around 6:30, 7 o'clock that morning, I believe. So, there wasn't a huge mad dash of people. It wasn't crazy. It was very controlled. It was very organized. There was a lot of support there from Chesapeake Police, Chesapeake City officials, helping families, helping them figure out, what they can do. They had chaplains on site. One thing I remember one of the police officers telling me was, I asked her, I'm like, so we saw 2 more chaplains come in. And she was like, they're not from Chesapeake. They must be from somewhere else. And that just immediately in the hours after this happened just goes to show how much the community was trying to come out there to support the victims and their families and trying to just provide any type of support whatsoever. So I was there that night at the conference center, and then in the morning hours the presence there started to die down, and then again the focus went back to the site where the tragedy happened at the Walmart, and then other stuff that happened throughout the rest of the day. And Julie, you covered it the next day too.
Yeah, I kind of picked up the baton from you guys after waking up to it, and my assignment the next day was to learn everything we could about the suspect. Walmart confirmed fairly early on the suspect's name, and we've decided as a team, and Adrian, I'm not sure if you want to address this as the executive producer of investigations, that we've decided not to name the person responsible for this shooting. So when you hear us refer to the shooter or the suspect, that is who we're speaking about. But we learned a little bit about him from his neighbors, who were very forthcoming about the fact that they didn't know a whole lot. They saw him in passing, and you hear a lot when these things happen and you talk to neighbors, they say he mostly kept to himself. But he had worked at Walmart for over 10 years. He'd been there since 2010. He was a team lead. And we spoke to a few people that day who had worked with him. Many of them were surprised because they said he was a very quiet guy. They did not expect this kind of thing. And of course, as this conversation continues, we'll address the new things that we're learning. But we knew that as Adrian mentioned, the police were very forthcoming with what they could share and when. And we learned fairly early on that there had been a death note or a so-called manifesto that he had left behind on his phone. And we'll address that in this conversation as well. But it was hard to piece together why this could have happened. I think in the beginning, we were so focused on just getting the information out about the victims and how many victims there were and the level of injuries sustained during this, while also trying to piece together everything we knew about the suspect.
John, I wanted to go back to you to talk about, what you saw at the center and what were some of the main questions that people were asking that night, or some of the main thoughts that people had as they were trying to come up with information.
Yeah, so I mean, just because, just out of respect for these families who are waking up in the middle of the night, I didn't go up to any family members. If somebody looked upset, somebody had tears in their eyes with holding hands with family, I was not going up to them. I couldn't live with myself if I did that. So we did speak to one woman, though, who actually used to work at that Walmart, and she came up and she actually spoke to us. We had an interview with her. It's probably somewhere on our coverage online. And she talked with us because she worked there twice in the early 2000s, and that was still her Walmart. That was still the store she went to, and she still knew so many people from there that she was trying to get information about. So she went to the conference center to try to learn about, how are my friends doing? She texted them, called them, wasn't hearing back from people. I actually got texts from people in the community I know who knew people who also worked there and were saying the same things like, hey, if you hear about so-and-so, can you please let me know how they're doing? And, we weren't allowed to go inside the conference center. It was strictly for family members, for loved ones of anybody who worked there. It was open to anybody who was a direct family member or employee of the Walmart. So the woman who we spoke to who used to work there, she wasn't allowed inside because, again, she wasn't a loved one, or, she wasn't related to anybody who worked inside the building at the time. And so they were trying to keep it more controlled to the families of the people who were hurt or injured or unfortunately passed away because of what happened. But it was really, again, there was a lot of resources provided on the ground from the city of Chesapeake and from police. Like I said before, there were chaplains there. They also said they had different resources from the city who were there to provide human resources to some of the victims and their families as they're trying to process this and try to understand what to go through next. I mean, talking about now, there's a substantial amount of resources out there in the community. There's Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration hotline. There's resources for employees and families of Norfolk Naval Shipyard. There's an Office for Victims of Crime online resources. There's also for law enforcement, there's an assistance program that was set up through the state in 2008 following the mass shooting at Virginia Tech. So there's a lot of resources out there in the community for anybody who's still processing that. If you're watching at home and you're still trying to process this and trying to work through all of this, don't worry, you're not alone. A lot of us here still are too, but there are resources everywhere for people as they're trying to work through this. But there are resources on the day one, hours, minutes after the shooting. There's still a bunch of resources out there now. So yeah, that was...
Absolutely. And going, back to the scene, that has become a place where, there has been vigils going on. There has been memorials set up. I don't know who wants to speak to, what you saw the scene, maybe Julie, and just talk about, what does it look like out there in the parking lot, the days following?
Oh, the days following, I mean, it was, they have what you call Reporter Row, network stations from all over the country there broadcasting. A memorial got put together there pretty quickly. It started out with just a few balloons, and then it became, you're looking at a picture of it now on your screen. It's grown over the last in the last week since this happened, and people have been coming there, I know, to pay their respects as this continued. But we were out there. That was kind of our home base for a few days as we were reporting on this, and even over the Thanksgiving holiday, we spent a lot of time there. That's where we would work out of to gather information and to continue to try to collect as much information as we could. I believe it was Saturday or perhaps into Sunday when the FBI wrapped up their investigation there and kind of handed it back over to Chesapeake Police and said, or at least the store now, there's no more active scene there. Now it's back in Walmart's hands, and Walmart has to decide what they're going to do with that store. They're going to remodel it, which I know they did in 2019 when there was a mass shooting at a Walmart in El Paso, or if they're going to shut it down. We do know, I believe, that the employees there are still getting paid, and even though the store's not open, Walmart is still paying them and helping as well with funeral expenses for the victims and their families.
Right, and you said something really important there that maybe, Adrian, you can touch on about how transparent the police has been. And can we just go through, sort of the breakdown of, when they first started talking to us, telling us information, and what we knew right away coming out of there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Leo Kaczynski, I'll name him by name, is the PIO in Chesapeake, and he's been wonderful to work with for a very long time. But what struck me is how wonderful he was to work with that night. Not only was he so quick with information, I sent him a text right before 11, and I was on the phone sending as much information as he could within a couple of minutes. And that's important because, especially with an active shooter situation, it is really important to get that information out to the public so that they can avoid the scene, so they can start calling their loved ones. By the time that we got to the scene, Leo had a little bit more information. He was there with a fire department PIO, and they were able to update us. They were able to go live so that the public knew exactly what they knew. He was very honest when he didn't know or if he couldn't comment. And he also gave us, this was, I think when you're hearing about something like this on the news or you're reporting on it from a journalism point of view, you kind of have in your head how bad it might be. It's terrible, but like when we're talking about, when I responded there, I didn't necessarily think that 6 innocent people would have died or that another 3 would have been injured. And when I got there, Leo told us a roundabout number of it won't be more than this, and that number was 10, or that he didn't believe that it was more than that. When you hear the number 10, I mean, it's very shocking. So the fact that he was able to give us that information, and then 8 a.m. the next day, they were able to give us as much information as they could, including information about a search warrant they'd executed at the shooter's home. And then I'll tell you, I was on Thanksgiving break with my family when I saw that Chesapeake Police put out a copy of the death note. And I was very surprised, but I was also thinking, I admired their transparency, and not just for us, we're information collectors, but I think that for me, and probably for some other people here, the questions that linger in the wake of a tragedy, whether it's personal or community, those are the things that you grapple with for a really long time. And I think that was a way for police to provide some answers. If you've read that note, it doesn't provide all the answers, but it gives you a bit of an idea. Exactly what police know. So I do want to commend Chesapeake Police. From my point of view as a journalist, I thought that they were incredibly transparent and incredibly reactive. And, they have done a wonderful job.
Right, and I just want to add, they've been communicative with us, but they've also done a great job on Twitter, reaching out to the public, letting them know information firsthand.
Yeah. I think they recognize the importance of that this is not just an individual tragedy, it's a community tragedy. And they've responded, in my opinion, in a really positive way.
And I don't know if someone wants to speak to the fact that there were so many people in the store at that time. It was the night before, in preparation, for Thanksgiving, that people were sort of maybe getting, that night of, Tuesday, getting some things that they might have needed. People were out doing their normal activities. So if someone just wants to speak to what that was like that we've either heard of, just the general, environment there.
Well, I can tell you that we spoke with a woman, right after it happened, about an hour after it happened, who was there just picking up a couple of things for Thanksgiving. And luckily she was leaving the store as the shooting broke out. I know someone personally who had sent a loved one there just a few hours before that happened. I don't know about you all, but like last minute shopping, it's a thing. People are there, lines are not super long at that time of night. I think there were about 50 people who were in the Walmart at that time. And from the description of the eyewitness that we spoke with, she just said it was like a mad rush to get out the door once you heard, because she heard a gunshot and was confused, like, anybody might be. And then she heard continuous gunshots, and I think that's when it sunk in for everyone that they needed to get out of there. And one other thing I wanted to bring up, which is just like a little anecdote, but just to kind of speak to the first responders again, there were people who were showing up to Walmart and didn't know about the Reunification Center for whatever reason, people who had loved ones who worked at Walmart. And one of the first responders I spoke with said a man had come. He was looking for, I believe it was his daughter's car, and that the first responder had helped him identify it, and it was still in the parking lot. And that's the atmosphere of that scene. And where you were at, John, too, is like, in those immediate moments, all you can think about is my loved one safe? I sent them there to pick up bread, or they work the night shift. And the first responders doing everything they can in the city, doing everything they can to reunify people.
And I want to kind of touch on something you said, Adrian, too, kind of praising Chesapeake police, city officials. It's worth mentioning, too, like, everybody knows Walmart. There's a bunch of different types. There's the neighborhood markets. There's the smaller ones. This was a super center. This wasn't just the average little, neighborhood Walmart. This was a massive store that police had to secure, lock down, try to search for survivors. I mean, again, all the anecdotes we've heard, a friend of a friend, someone told me that someone they knew who was working there hid in a freezer while this was going on. You know, there's all those stories out there because this was such a large facility where this happened. And the night, 2 nights before Thanksgiving, while people are out trying to get supplies and things like that. And a lot of what we saw is the human elements coming out in a tragedy when nobody wants something like this to happen. Nobody wants to try to have to process how to get through all of this, disseminate information in an effective way and figure things out, you know, and be woken up in the middle of the night to learn about this. But there was a lot of human elements that came out. You know, the human side of people came out more than the, you know, bad side of people, I would say, at that period of time. I mean, especially in the days following, we saw, you know, there's vigils for victims that started the days after the shooting. There was a vigil Sunday night. There was a vigil a couple nights ago on, I believe it was Monday night, was the vigil in Chesapeake?
Yeah.
Monday night, and Governor Glenn Youngkin came. I mean, this is, to put it in perspective, this is the second mass shooting that happened in Virginia in the span of 2-3 weeks. And so not only is the state, our local community, in a state of shock and just emotionally, mentally exhausted, but let's get real, the whole state is. And then you expand that out, the country is sick of these things happening. So in that time of such pressure and trauma and having to process all of this, there was so many good examples of human beings and being good humans first coming out in a time of tragedy and trauma. I mean, going to the scene, talking about what Julie talked about, touching on the scene in the days following. Monday night, I was out at the scene, Monday covering, you know, what we knew in the investigation so far. And the whole day, I was sitting outside where the little makeshift memorial is, and the whole day you just saw people coming up and paying their respects and leaving balloons and leaving, you know, different things out there. You see it right now. People brought those crosses on both sides and left those with the victims' names on it. People signed those little blue hearts on those crosses to the left. There was notes written on, you know, different things that were there. I saw a woman come up and lay wreaths at every single one of those crosses that she just bought and brought herself. She lit candles. So, you know, in the days following this tragedy, we're just being constantly reminded of the sense of community and how strong people are here in the 757 here in Hampton Roads in the wake of yet another mass shooting here in the last 3 years, which no one ever expects to have to live through again, and no one expects to have to deal with. But you know, again, and kind of talking too about like the future of the store, because that was something else at the scene on Monday. Had a woman pull up, and people, you know, would ask about the memorial. They'd ask about what's going on. They'd ask about what we know, and a lot of the questions: when's the store reopening? When is this people's local Walmart? You know, this is where people go to get their, you know, their groceries. They go to do their shopping. Walmart, in a statement yesterday that they sent out to associates, said that they, for the time being, for the foreseeable future, the store is going to remain closed. Like Julie had mentioned, there was a similar situation in El Paso back in 2019. That store there was closed for about 3 months or so as they determined what they were going to do with it, repainted, remodeled, whatever. So that seems to be a similar scenario of what's going to happen to this Walmart as well. This is going to be closed for a while. You know, don't expect to be able to go back in there. There's 2 lines of barricades in the parking lot that, you know, outside of the store. So there is going to be a lot of internal discussions within Walmart, within that group of people working there, to figure out what they're going to do next here. But I mean, for right now, just what's next, what's happening with that store, it's going to be closed for a while. And honestly, rightfully so.
And I just want to take 1 second. I see people commenting on Facebook. I just want to say, if you do have questions that we are not covering, that we have not answered yet, please write them in the live. I can see them, and we can get your questions answered to really give you the information that you want to know. John, you said something about, you know, sort of the local, state, national response. Can you speak to any specifics of, you know, who are some of the people that have reached out, have made public statements, and, you know, have spoken out about this?
Yeah, I mean, I remember that night, you know, Governor Glenn Youngkin, Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears, they immediately tweeted things out. And in the weeks following, you know, the days following, I should say, you know, we saw President Biden also tweet out the next morning, release a statement. There was a lot of obviously you immediately get the national attention. I mean, I'm sure Julie, Adrian, your phones were blowing up that day, that night, and the days following. And then our responsibility, our job is we are the ones still here after all of this happens, because this is our community. All the national cameras, all of that goes away, but this is our community, and we're still going to be the ones here trying to get answers and trying to fight to find things out. So there was a large outpouring of support. You know, we saw both our senators, Mark Warner, Tim Kaine, speak about it. I believe Senator Tim Kaine is speaking about it today in his media availability as well. So we'll have those updates starting on Wavy News 10 at 4. But there's just been such a large outpouring of support. And again, in a community that experienced a similar tragedy just 3 years ago. And it's sad to say it like this, and I hate to say it like this, but communities now are starting to, unfortunately, know how to respond to this. And this is something that they shouldn't have to, but you know, we are learning how to respond to this, how to support people. You know, there's GoFundMe set up everywhere. The United Way of Southampton Roads, they have different funding areas for people. You know, there's a lot of different areas of support that are still out there right now, aside from GoFundMe's for the victims' families, but stuff set up on larger scales to help everyone as well.
So I want to take this time, you know, as we're talking about the impact, to talk about the victims. And not in the victims that have passed away, and then also the victims that are, you know, currently in the hospital and that have recovered. So I don't know if, Adrian, if you would just want to, or Julie, if you want to talk about the victims. I feel like you have a good...
Yeah, I can actually speak to a little bit about each victim. In the last week or so, our whole team has been working to learn about who these people were and who they left behind. So I know we have that graphic up there on the screen, all the way to the left there. That's Brian Pendleton. He was 38 years old. He was from Chesapeake. He recently marked his 10-year anniversary working at Walmart. You got me?
Yes.
So I think if the audio cut out there, we'll go back. I had been talking about 52-year-old Kelly Piles. She was from Chesapeake, and she had been living in Kentucky previously, but was raised in Norfolk and moved back to this area after reconnecting with her high school sweetheart on Facebook, and they were engaged to be married. Lorenzo Gamble, he was 43 years old. He was from Chesapeake. He was a father of 2. He was a custodian on the night shift and had worked at Walmart for 15 years. That's according to the Washington Post. 22-year-old Tanika Johnson was from Portsmouth and a graduate of Western Branch High School. We had spoken to a former tutor of hers who says that she was very ambitious, had big dreams of going to college. And the youngest victim, 16-year-old Fernando Chavez Barone, I believe he went by Jesus, his middle name Jesus. He was an 11th grade honor student who had just started his part-time job at Walmart to help out his family. His parents say he loved playing with Legos. There were also 3 other people who were hurt by gunfire. 2 of them are still at Centera. Sarah Walker is one of them. She is a young mom. She has 3 kids. She was shot multiple times and has so far had 2 surgeries. Her mom has been posting regular updates on Facebook and says that she's still in the ICU and she's working towards recovery. And then Jaylon Jones is 24. He was shot in the back and the chest. He's still in the hospital recovering. His mom spoke with our colleague Kiana Patterson and told her that her son had worked at the Walmart there for about a year. So it is important to remember these people and who they were and who they left behind.
Yeah, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to say that unfortunately, we've had to cover these types of shootings, mass shootings, and as a station, we're very committed to keeping the community and the victims and the survivors centered, which is why as a station, as a team, we've made the decision not to continue naming the shooter, because the names that Julie just read off to you are the names that are most important to hold in your highest thoughts right now. And as you're describing all of these people, and I'm thinking about, you know, a teenager's first job or reconnecting with your high school sweetheart, people just living their normal lives and going to work. And those are the people that we want to remember. So we just wanted to be transparent when you hear us say the shooter, the suspect. It's because we want you to remember the names of the people who were stolen or impacted.
And I also wanted to speak to the Walmart employees that are in the hospital right now, and sort of what we know about their care and what has happened.
So we know one of the women in the hospital right now is Sarah Walker. She was shot multiple times, I believe in the face. And her mom has been very proactive about posting updates and the like on Facebook about her condition and how she's doing. She's still in the ICU right now. She's working towards recovery. There is also a GoFundMe set up for expenses related to her care, and I believe the care of her young children as well. And then Jaylon Jones is a 24-year-old who was shot in the back and the chest and is expected to continue recovering. His mom spoke to our colleague, Kiana Patterson, and told us that he had worked at that Walmart for about a year.
And then there was a third employee who was released. And that was one thing I remember, as we talk about it, my memory's jogged, but one of the things that stuck out to me on the scene was when I was talking to Leo, I said, you know, is anyone hurt badly enough that they might be at Centera? What I meant by that is that's the area's trauma center. And he said, yes, definitely. So that too, it's another thing in those hours. We're learning about it just a little bit quicker than the community is, because we're telling you all as quickly as we can. And those are the kinds of things that we're learning in those hours that tell you this is big, this is community changing. And John, just to speak to something you said too, you know, you've had people coming out and checking in on you, or you're checking in on them, just to show you what kind of community we have here. There's a woman that I interviewed that very next day. I'd only ever met her one time. It's for a completely unrelated story. And she said, she lives very close to that Walmart. She said, you were the first person I thought of when that shooting happened, because she said, I thought you might be out there. How are you doing? That's the kind of community that we live in, where our community members, we're all impacted. We check in with each other. We care about each other. So that was just very touching to me.
And John, we just got a notification. Can you just share what the latest news is?
So we actually just got an email from Congressman Bobby Scott's office. He represents the 3rd Congressional District in the House of Representatives. He just spoke on the House floor. I'm going to read part of what he said on the floor. He rises today with a heavy heart to honor the victims of last week's tragic mass shooting. Last week was a time when we all should have been celebrating and gathering with our friends and loved ones, giving thanks for all the blessings in our lives. But instead, 6 families had empty chairs at their tables, and then he went to honor he said the names of each and every victim on the House floor. He said, and as we mourn over 600 other mass shootings in America just this year alone, where communities are also grappling with grief and loss, Chesapeake now joins the list of far too many communities forced to bear the unbearable. Chesapeake is resilient, but we must do more. I implore every member of this body and every elected official in the country to do everything in their power to stop the plague of gun violence in our communities. So again, that was something that Congressman Bobby Scott just this morning said on the House floor in Washington, D.C. To honor the victims of 1 week later.
And that's pretty powerful, honestly, that he was able to do that this afternoon. You know, there has been a lot of speeches given on gun violence over the years. Do you think in his community, if that can sort of evoke the change necessary, at least down here? I know his head seems to be in the right place with the statement, but I think a lot of viewers are going to wonder, is that statement going to be more than words?
And that's up for the viewers to decide in 2 years when they head back to the polls in 2024. I mean, we have another election, and that's how you get your voices heard. In 2 years, all House of Representatives will be up. I believe Virginia Senate will also be up for election as well. So, this is how you tell your elected representatives that you agree or you disagree with what they're doing and what they're saying. Speaking about the victims really quickly, I want to just touch on something anecdotally, kind of personally as well, about one of the victims, Fernando Chavez Barron. His family was one of the first ones to hold a vigil for him outside, and that vigil is still there. And I just want to say en español, por la parte de nuestra comunidad aquí en Wavy TV 10, que nuestras condolencias están con ustedes de la familia de Fernando. Estamos pensando en ustedes en este tiempo muy duro para ustedes y sí, estamos aquí para ustedes, para ayudar en cualquier manera que podemos. I just want to get that out there.
And I'll just add on really quick. I'm looking at this graphic of the victims, and I believe I skipped over Mr. Randy Blevins, who was a 70-year-old Chesapeake resident who had been working at Walmart since the 90s. He'd always worked that overnight shift, and we're told that he liked the overnight shift because it freed up his days to do things like go to Norfolk Admirals games and watch his Washington Commanders on TV.
And I think it's worth us also touching more on some of the stuff Walmart has done recently. Walmart has been really responsive. Just yesterday we got updates from them. If you guys weren't watching last night, Wavy News 10 at 4 and 5 and 6, we had those updates. Just to reiterate, I think one of you guys touched on it earlier, was talking about that the company said that they will support the victims' families with funeral travel and other expenses as they continue to mourn. They are also continuing to pay all of their employees at the store as this continues to go on. The store is still closed, and they are still going to pay their employees. The Walmart Foundation also plans to contribute $1 million to the United Way of Southampton Roads' Hope and Healing Fund. They're also providing a match for associate donations as well. We have seen, again, talking about that community of support coming out after this tragedy. That's what we're seeing as well from Walmart, who's, again, 3 years ago, a similar situation happened at a Walmart in Texas, in El Paso.
And that was one of the main viewer questions on here, so I'm glad that we cleared that up for them. I wanted to turn it over to Adrian.
Yeah, so just as Bobby Scott had remarks that he made today, Senator Tim Kaine also made remarks today, and it kind of leads into a conversation that we've been having in our investigative team and in our newsroom. So he says, and he references 3 major mass shootings that have happened in the last couple of weeks: University of Virginia, Colorado Springs, and now Walmart in Chesapeake. He says there were warning signs about the people who committed those horrible crimes. He says likely warning signs that were missed. And then he goes on to say, a lot of people have confusion and they'll see a warning sign, but they're not sure what to do with it. We need to create mechanisms on campus, within workforces, within society, generally, where you can take a warning sign if you think you see one, not to get somebody in trouble, but so that they can get help. This is in line with conversations we've been having. I think we have the same types of conversations in newsrooms that viewers have around the dinner table, where we have questions. Those questions were heightened for me personally after the shooter's death note was released. And then yesterday, when a former employee filed a $50 million lawsuit against Walmart, I want to say that the company has said they're reviewing this person's complaint and they'll be responding appropriately within the court. I won't go too in depth on this lawsuit. These are just allegations, but essentially this woman was an employee. She was there when the shooting happened in the break room. She said that she had reported the shooter based on some concerning behaviors and remarks that she says he made, including remarks about her age, gender, socioeconomic status, appearance, but also about other things. There was a concerning remark about an animal that she alleges was said, some concerning implications of violence that if he were to ever get fired, people would remember his name, things like that. One of the questions that we had, actually, before I hit on that, I'll say we have spoken with a second employee who's reached out to us, a former employee who will be speaking with our Haley Mylon later on this evening. That employee is going to be anonymous, but I am actually pulling up just a few of the things. That person's going to be anonymous tonight, but you will be able to see them in the newscast. They said that they left working at Walmart because of the shooter, who was a manager on the overnight shifts, that they reported several incidents to corporate, and that they didn't feel as though Walmart had done enough. Now, once again, Walmart is going to be responding to these complaints appropriately. They've responded to our questions, and I know that they feel very deeply saddened for the associates who are impacted there. It kind of ties back into a conversation we were having yesterday about warning signs when you're working with somebody or you're friends with someone. What's a warning sign? What's a personality quirk? What are the things you can do? And one of the interesting things that our investigative reporter Chris Horn brought up, and I just learned this, is that corporations can demand you to seek mental health treatment. If you're in a position where a corporation says you need to seek mental health treatment or you'll be let go, they can put you in that position, but they cannot ask follow-up questions about how much treatment you got, what type, whether or not you're ready to come back to work. So it was just an interesting thing that we learned. I don't know what recourses Walmart took, whether or not these complaints were actually lodged, but it is interesting that we have several employees who have come forward kind of saying similar things. But then we've also had employees that said he seemed like a very nice person, you know, that nothing really seemed different. I mean, Julie, you may be able to speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think everyone we've spoken to and a lot of the employees that have come forward to speak have asked to be anonymous. I don't think there's any disagreement that he was a little bit quiet and reserved and maybe not as socially adept as some other people might be. I think some of the allegations in the lawsuit have been corroborated by other people who have come out and said, yeah, he made comments that you wouldn't necessarily make to a coworker. And then we saw in his death note, he said, you know, one of his regrets is that his parents didn't recognize that he was lacking some social skills. And that's what he wished for. It was that he said, if I could change anything, it would be that my parents paid more attention to my social deficits. So I think the suspect himself is admitting that he has social deficits before this even happens. And I spoke to a younger employee who was in the break room when the shooting happened. He'd only worked at Walmart for about a month and a half, but I asked him about some of these things, and he mentioned that he was a very nitpicky manager. Like, he was very particular about things, and that's why a lot of people kind of were like, watch out for him, because, you know, he will come down on you if you're not doing everything exactly right. So I think that was a little bit of his reputation. Of course, the death note also alleges people teased him, and we don't know that that's true. And one thing I also want to mention is that that young man that was in the break room when the shooting happened pointed out to me that from what he saw, it didn't look like the shooter was targeting particular people. So when we talk about these victims and the people that are no longer with us, and then also saying that this shooter claimed he was bullied by these people, he's not, from what we understand, he was not picking out these 6 people who are no longer with us and saying that they bullied him. From the accounts inside the room, it sounds like he just indiscriminately shot those shots in very, very quickly.
And I think it's worth kind of bouncing off of what you said, Julie, kind of just saying what we don't know. I mean, for starters, Monday morning, first place I went to was Chesapeake Court. There are no search warrants that have been filed yet. And even the clerk said they're probably going to be sealed.
Yeah, I spoke with Leo this morning just asking, and he said he believed that they would be sealed, which just so that the public understands this too, search warrants are public documents, but when there's more to lose than there is to gain by, you know, people knowing about an investigation early on, police can go before a judge and ask that those search warrants be sealed up to 90 days. If it needs to be sealed longer, they'll go back to a judge. And I'll be honest with you, I've been to Chesapeake Court a lot. They don't seal as often as other jurisdictions, so I respect it when a jurisdiction chooses to seal that information, because you know it will become public. at some point. But right now, they're really just trying to respond to the immediacy of the tragedy.
And also too, that means we don't know what the FBI found in the home. And going off of things that we know in the investigation, the FBI, ATF, Chesapeake Police, they searched the suspect's home, the gunman's home. We don't know what they found. We don't know what else they could have found inside the home. That's going off of what Adrian said. Those are things that will come out as this investigation continues in the coming weeks, coming months, which is things that we're going to stay on top of and try to make sure we can learn new details as soon as we can and get that out to everyone at home. But there, as much Adrian was talking earlier about how transparent the city of Chesapeake was. That should be a sign then, as the questions we still have unanswered, there's probably a reason for that. We got a lot of answers out right away, but there's a reason why we're not getting answers right now still.
Yeah, I think one thing we also don't know is what we do know is that he had a pistol and that it was legally obtained. What we don't know and police are not releasing right now is where he purchased the gun at, which is a little bit different than, for example, the UVA shooting where police made the choice to release that information. I'm sure police have a reason why they're withholding it at this point in time, and we may learn it in the future. Julie, I believe that someone confirmed to you, because Julie actually was at the shooter's home the morning after it happened. She captured this really amazing photo, which I think is on wavy.com right now, but it is of the suspect's door that was kicked in when they were executing the search warrant. And at that time, they hadn't found anything of note. That being said, we know digital files, all kinds of things that they could be looking at right now that I'm sure the FBI is looking at right now to try and find as many answers for the community as possible. So the findings of that search warrant may change. Time will tell on that.
And I just wanted to ask, where should viewers know that information's coming from? Who is going to take this investigation forward? Can we just talk about, some of the next steps that could happen?
In terms of the investigation?
Yes, in terms of FBI, are they, looking into it? Is it going to be the city of Chesapeake that we're looking to?
I believe it's a Chesapeake Police right now.
I think they're working in conjunction, or they, at least in the very beginning, have been working in conjunction with the FBI and the ATF. But I do know that the city of Chesapeake has asked that people refer to their official Twitter for official information. I'll tell you, we're all tuned in to Chesapeake's Twitter, all of the city's Twitters. We are a good source for anyone looking for vetted information as well. But the police department's Twitter and the city of Chesapeake's Twitter are where those major breaking updates are going to come from. I am confident, just like with the press conference, that when there are large events where the police or the city feel that they need to come and address the public in a verbal way, that they will let us know, and we will have all of that for you on wavy.com.
And I wanted to talk about some of the vigils, that we found out. It's not Walmart, it's not the city of Chesapeake that is sort of controlling the vigil at the Walmart parking lot right now. That's up. Can we just talk about, I think Brett Hall reported on it yesterday, just about the fact that it is up for now. I think there is a possibility that it might go down at some point.
I think my understanding was that, and I'm going to refer back to Brett's email that he sent, but I believe my understanding was that Walmart was going to, yes, they were going to let the memorial remain there for at least the next week to allow victims' families to come and even possibly take some of the things away, like if they want to take one of those crosses, which correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that the same person who created those crosses in Chesapeake also did that for Virginia Beach. They'll be looking at options of whether or not they should be removing that memorial. Following that, I think Walmart understands the impact this has on the community. It seems like they're not in a huge rush, and we'll see going forward whether or not this city decides to create a permanent monument. That's not even something that's been brought up at this point, but it is something that in the wake of 531 in Virginia Beach was a point. So there, I'm sure, is the possibility of that conversation in Chesapeake.
And I just wanted to go back to the city's reaction. They did on Monday declare a state of emergency and give funding to provide for, the city in this case. And as John pointed out, Walmart is providing for those victims' families. And so can we just talk a little bit about what the city is sort of going to help, cater to with those funds?
Yeah, so Monday night, Chesapeake City Council held a special session to declare a state of emergency. So Mayor Rick West spoke with us multiple times over the last few days, but specifically about this special session. He said the declaring the state of emergency was to do two different things. One, to make it legal for the city to apply for reimbursements for expenses from the emergency cost of the shooting at the Walmart. And this will also speed up the reimbursement of what the city spends, which he estimated to be about $25,000 for in the response to this incident at the Walmart. So again, this is something that multiple angles are having to address. The city, Walmart, because this happened on at a business, at a private company, on private property. So the city and all of these people are trying to work together to get people the resources they need in the weeks following.
Yeah, and this is part of our experience being local journalists in this community, having covered another mass shooting in Virginia Beach, which I don't know, Julie and John, I don't believe you were here at that time. I was here during that time, and I've kind of often looked back at that, not in a way to compare, but in a way to prepare myself going forward. John mentioned earlier, it's like communities have trained to respond to this, and journalists have learned how to respond to this, and that's very unfortunate. So as I reflect back on what happened in Virginia Beach and what that may mean going forward for us, it means that the next part of this chapter for us as local journalists is covering the way that the community is going to choose to heal and the way that they're going to choose to honor the victims and the survivors. The fact that the survivors have a long road ahead of them, I'm sure. And then any potential legal questions that could be raised when they come out with their final report, or they kind of conclude their investigation. I'm sure they're going to do the best that they can to answer questions, and there will still be questions. Those are the lessons I've learned from the past 3 years, and when I look forward to the coverage, I think these are some of the same things that are going to be happening in Chesapeake. And it's really devastating because I was talking with another colleague after this happened. It was the day after, and we both looked at each other and we said, we feel like we were just here. And you don't ever want it to be your community. And when it happens, you think, I can't believe it happened. And then when it happens again, you can't believe that you're back there. So just so the viewers know, we live here. We love this area. This is our community as well. Some of us shopped at that Walmart. I was there the week prior with my sister, taking her to dinner nearby. As local journalists, we're very, very committed to this community. So if you have questions here now going forward, please feel free to reach out to us because we stand with you.
And I just want to pull up some footage from the Monday vigil.
Tonight,
I think
we
that
would
was a
like-
really powerful opportunity for the community to grieve together and be out there. And it was, candlelit, and, the governor was there, the mayor was there. And there are moments where the community is going to come together in the future. But this was one of those moments really to honor the victims and survivors of the mass shooting. John, I just wanted to go back to something you said at the beginning, and I feel like it deserves a little bit more time just to talk about what are some of the ways that people can seek assistance right now. And I think that would be a nice way to sort of, carry us on into like the future as we're waiting for more investigative notes. So if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so for starters, anybody watching, you don't have to grab a pen and paper. We have all this on wavy.com. I'm going to just reiterate them right now for anybody who needs them. There's Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration helpline. Anybody who works at the shipyard, the Norfolk Naval Shipyard, there's resources for employees and families. There's an office for victims of crime. There's online resources there as well. Also, too, in the statement from Walmart yesterday, they said that victims' families and their associates, people who work for Walmart, associates and their families also have access to resources through their own private benefits through Walmart as well. There's also a number of resources in the community out there. There are a number of different places you can go to for, either mental health assistance, grief counseling. There's a number of places in the area. But again, we have a lot of these resources put together over on wavy.com for anybody who's looking for them and who may need them as we continue to process all of what has happened here.
Thank you, John. And Julie, I think what I think is best to do in order to honor the victims, can you, as we close here, just read their names again so that people know, who was really affected by this and their families?
Sure. If we go across the graphic here, it's Brian Pendleton. He was 38 years old. Kelly Pyle, she was 52 years old. Lorenzo Gamble was 43 years old. Randy Blevins was 70 years old. Tynika Johnson was 22 years old. And Fernando Jesus Chavez Barron was just 16 years old.
Thank you, Julie. And I think I speak for us that, we will, as Adrienne said and as John has said and Julie, continuing to follow this investigation. Please head to wavy.com to see the investigation of what we covered so far from our reporters in the field and our team, at the station, and then continue to watch tonight as sort of things develop. We will let you know what those developments are. And as John pointed out, please go to wavy.com if you need to seek resources, if you are looking for ways to support the community, if you're looking ways to support those families, that is a good resource to go to. But thank you so much, Adrienne, John, and Julie. I hope anyone watching out there that we've answered your questions, and if you have more, like everyone said, please continue to watch and reach out if we are not answering the question that you have. And we will do our best to stay transparent with you about what we know. And again, the City of Chesapeake, head to their Twitter, and they are going to keep you updated as well. So thank you all so much for watching, and continue to tune in to Wavy to hear about the investigation and continue honoring the victims. And we are with you, Chesapeake.